in sisterhood, the way she designs it is that you're doing this in sisterhood where we're very much saying we're not having this bottomless or this, impossible expectation conversation about women and womanhood and sisterhood. We're not having that mainstream conversation in here. We're having this conversation where we get to be all the things and not have it mean something negative and not have it mean it's taking from each other.
Hello and welcome to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and today is going to be such a good day, my friends. I am so excited to share with you this incredible human who I fell in love with a few years ago. She is an embodiment coach and a social marketing professional, but that's the least of her phenomenalness. She has a passion to strengthen the lives of women, not just here in Maine, which is where I met her, but all over the world. She's raised here in Maine, and she has an incredible, fascinating background. She's done everything. She's beyond the social marketing. She's done manual labor and writing, and she's a clinical psychology degree, and she is just so phenomenal. But what I'm so excited to talk to her about today is body positivity, acceptance of your body, and all the empowerment that comes along with it. And I just cannot wait for you to meet the one and only Libby Bunten. Welcome!
Thank you. I am so excited to be here with you and to play for the next hour and just dance into all the places we go.
First, I just have to start. Everybody who I welcome on, all the experts I welcome onto the show, I ask to please send me some beautiful headshots so that I can use them to promote this episode. You are the very first person ever on the Business of Happiness podcast to send me a photo of you in your underwear.
Yes. Oh God, yes. That really, I have chills. That makes me so delighted. I was like, I always throw that one in the mix because this is what I'm up to, So thank you for acknowledging me for, setting a record.
If you did. You set the expectation so high. Now I'm going to dare people from now on. When you send me a headshot, throw in one of you in your underwear, please, because that is now the new definition of courage in my book. I am so inspired by you, Libby. This is so incredible. Share with my audience a little bit of your journey, please.
Oh my gosh. Well, first, I just want to say thank you again, Tarryn, because you are just so radiant always, so supportive always, so cheering me on always in every way.
It's all you, my love. It's all you.
Thank you. And I just want to acknowledge you for that because this is how you move in the world and it's incredible to be part of it. And thank you for trusting me with your audience. So a little bit about me, I feel like I've lived many lifetimes at this point in my 43 years. But I've had a lot of ups and downs. Let's put it that way. I grew up in a pretty rugged environment. I love my family dearly. Some of my family. I'm very tight with them. And we grew up in an environment that was very chaotic, that, our parents were children when they had children. So there was a lot happening and there was a lot of opportunity for me to kind of grow up fast. So that's where the story really begins. And it put me on this path, I'm realizing now, of being a fierce nurturer and also really being willing to walk into the fire of the hard things. So fast forward many years, I like you said, I had every job under the sun. One of the longest jobs I had was bartending, which I loved because you get to be really sassy and you get to leverage your personality and stuff like that. But I always knew there was something more tugging at me. So I went to grad school to become a clinical therapist, thinking that was it. Looking back, I realized some of that was really to support myself through what I was going through with my family, specifically my mom, who was really unwell at the time. She had a very complex trauma history and was in the end of her life at a very young age. So looking back, I fully see how I immersed myself in an environment with healers and therapists at a very critical time. Now, that's not to say I didn't value my education, because I did, and I was a therapist for like 5 years. And I think probably the greatest part of that was the support and the healing. So I became
Mm.
a clinical therapist. Is this where you're wanting me to go?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's so important because, when we share our stories, we see reflections of
Yeah.
ourselves in them. And I
Yeah.
think that you just pointed out a couple of just really poignant aspects of our human experience is that
Mhm.
there's so many layers, right?
So
And we
many.
get to see ourselves in those experiences when we look back, and we
Mhm.
get to see our development and honor that beautiful path that we've
Mhm.
traveled. So I love you sharing these stories because this is what we all can understand in
Yeah.
our common humanity. Yeah. So
Mhm.
please keep going. Tell me more.
Yes. Well, and I just before I keep going, like, one of the things I love about what you just shared is, I interestingly had this feeling that I was just kind of treading water, like keeping my head above
Mm.
water, and I was being perceived as somebody who was being very successful. So this is also a dance I think we do as women, when we have a hard time seeing ourselves. So throwing that in the mix for now, I'll put a little pin in that. But
Yeah,
yeah.
and such an important one as well, because I think so many of us feel, and the other aspect of your story that I completely connected with is that fierce nurturer part.
Mhm,
I think so
mhm.
many of us as women can relate to that part as well.
Yes.
Okay, keep
Okay.
going, fierce nurturer.
So
Keep telling me. So we're
yes, I'll
treading
keep
water,
telling you,
but we're
treading water, looking good doing it. This is a huge
and taking care of everyone
taking
around us
care
at
of
the same
everyone
time.
around. Yes, exactly. And
Mm.
also, like, you know, I had a lot of secret self-loathing. So, like eating stuff, body image stuff. I have a sexual trauma history, so some of that, of course, coming into the mix. So it's just really interesting to look back on it, because it's almost like, wow, that is so wild. A, that I made it out alive to tell the story here, and B, how different it felt in the experience than what was being perceived of me, because I was like the one who got straight A's, and I had that role in my family of I adopted achievement at a very young age because it helped me avoid, or at least I perceived that it helped me avoid conflict, and it helped me kind of separate from spaces that I didn't want to spend as much time in. So, anyway, we I what happened was is I got my degree in clinical counseling, and I started working with populations that I really loved and that were so challenging, like homeless, co-occurring adults for the most part. And I did spend my last few years working with teens who had a lot of addiction and abuse and stuff like that. That work was very, very meaningful. I don't ever want to discount that. And when my mom passed away, she took her life at a very young age. She was 52. I had already had this like bubbling up of, like, I knew in the first 6 months that I became a therapist that I wasn't gonna do it for the rest of my life, but I couldn't figure out why. I didn't know what was pulling at me. Part of it was, again, a subject we can touch on later, was trying to fill. I noticed, or I acknowledged that I was trying to fill this, like, bottomless void with achievement. I was trying to out achieve my stuff, and so there was that piece of the puzzle, and then also, um when my mom passed away, it was just this, like, everything that I thought was hard became really unimportant, and
Mm.
I stopped being willing to sacrifice or silence that part of me that was saying, "You can't make your biggest impact sitting here one-on-one with these people within a system that I actually really struggled with endorsing." It felt like I was endorsing a system that I didn't want to be supporting, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and it's so fascinating that this need, this void that was trying to be filled with accomplishment had been masking that all along. Like, you
Mhm,
had this feeling all along that it wasn't working for you, but the
mhm.
accomplishment attachment piece weighed so heavy, the
Mhm.
validation piece, that it was
Mhm.
almost kind of blinding you to that until
Mhm.
it took some big interrupter to make you
Yes.
take a step back. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and it's like it's a lifelong process too. This is a
Mhm.
many of most of the conversation that I have with people. I can't make small talk. My husband always makes fun of me. We'll be at a party. He's like, "Where's Libby?" "Oh, she's in the corner," and someone's telling them telling her their life story.
I know, I think that's why I fell in love with you. I think that's exactly one of the things that attracted me to you is like, there's no small talk here. We're
Yeah.
diving straight into it from the beginning.
Oh my gosh, yes, there's no small talk, and so the conversation that I'm always having, always, like the thread that almost I haven't I don't think I've had an experience where it didn't reveal itself is with women specifically because that's where I prioritize my resources and my time and my skills. This idea of like a this bottomless pit of
Mm.
desiring external validation and we're so culturally trained for it. I was just thinking about that this morning, and there's so many things I could talk about that, but like we're really trained out of our knowing, out of our enoughness, out of our divinity, out of all of these things, and so it can create this scenario where, and it's not just women, but I'm focusing this conversation there, where we're looking for, you know, validation in the bedroom, in the dining room, in the boardroom, in the, all the places. And
On
it
the
will
beach.
on the beach, it will never be full until we have usually a dark night of the soul and we start unwinding around this programming. So that's what happened with the major disruption in my mom's suicide. And well, that was the beginning, and that's when I literally remember sitting in my office across from a client 10 days after she died because I had to go back to work,
Mhm.
um, and thinking, "No, I can't. I know that I cannot, A, work for someone else, B, be beholden to a timeline for my healing and grieving ever again." So, I energetically shut the door even though I hadn't left my job yet. So that's kind of where the fork in the road was, I guess you could say, of leaving that field, but being unsure of where it was taking me.
So tell us about how your journey took you to this empowerment of women and its self-acceptance and self-empowerment and how you got to that amazing new passion in your life.
Yeah, so there are a lot of threads that braid into it, I guess you could say. What happened, so the jumping off point that then later really revealed even more to me about how I want to impact the world was starting a social marketing business online because I was in these spaces where women were cheering each other on. It was a different conversation. It was entrepreneurship. I had 3 jobs when I started that business, but I was like I have to find a way out. And I love to leverage teamwork and things like that. So it was just a really good fit for me, even though for years I didn't think it was. So fast forward, when after my mom passed away, I built my business to the point where I could leave my counseling job. And I was like, yay, this is going to be so great. I'm going to have all this time. Well, what really happened was it was all of a sudden because my business was built so that it was meant to be part time. I was all of a sudden just, it was just me and my grief that I had been kind of, I had gone to grief counseling, I'd gone to group counseling. I did, I'm trained as a therapist. I was doing all the things and I was still, it was like, it was woven with this bottomless pit of self-abandonment, invalidation that I picked up all over the place in, in my childhood, in cultural messaging and all that stuff. And so I came pretty undone. I had gotten very stuck at a certain place in my business and I went deep into the throes of my grief. I let that happen. I kind of honored that the best that I could in the moment. And then what happened is I continued to stay stuck in my business. So I, again, looking back, I look back at pictures of me. I was not dressing like myself. I was smiling and everyone thought, "Oh, you're doing so great. You're such a leader. This was the perception that I was very good at. I didn't realize I was putting this on, but this is what was happening. So I got to this point where I was like army crawling in my business
Mm.
and didn't know. I felt like there was something wrong with me because I was contributing in leadership in every way that you possibly could if you were at the top of the business or whatever. And everybody saw me that way, but I couldn't move the needle and I needed to. I had needs, like financial needs, but also I really wanted to help more women. And my favorite aspect of what I do in that endeavor is really helping other women see how valuable they are. So anyway, what happened is I ran into on Instagram a woman advertising a feminine leadership course or feminine leadership coaching group called Rockstar Camp. And
Mhm.
I clicked on it, messaged her. We had a Zoom. I knew immediately that we were meant to be together. I was terrified because we were financially completely strapped. So I was like, how am I going to do this? But I was in a dark night of the soul. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't keep doing this. So that was, there's more that ensued after that. But I don't know if you want to kind of capture any of what I just shared. But
Yeah, no, that's perfect because again, it was another one of those moments that felt like a lowest low.
mhm. Yeah.
And yet we get this insight in those moments. They're so painful to live through, Libby. They're
Mhm.
so hard to live through, and yet sometimes they're our greatest teachers.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, it's like forging the iron, like one of my favorite questions to ask myself is how is this obstacle directing me? Like, how is this
Mm.
obstacle pointing me in a new direction? Because it's really easy to get swallowed whole by it. And what happened is when I met Megan Joe, the founder of Rockstar Camp, I was like, "Oh, she's creating a space where women actually get to be
Mm.
swampy and joyful and, outrageous and have grief and have rage." I just could see it, I could feel it, I have chills right now, and it was the beginning of my complete unraveling around all of this head trash that I had absorbed, and also, around the inability to see myself.
Mm.
In sisterhood, the way she designs it is that you're doing this in sisterhood where we're very much saying we're not having this bottomless or this, impossible expectation conversation about women and womanhood and sisterhood. We're not having that mainstream conversation in here. We're having this conversation where we get to be all the things and not have it
Mm.
mean something negative and not have it mean it's taking from each other.
So cool. Okay. So you get this exposure to this new kind of perspective of
Mhm,
full acceptance.
mhm.
How did you then channel that into a full physical acceptance of yourself?
Yeah. Well, I had a lot of women who helped me along the way. I mean, I'm telling you, sisterhood in this way is the way, in my opinion, which is why
Mm.
I love to run group coaching. But so what happened is I just went full in. I mean, I went full in to this process and didn't care about coming undone in front of the other women. I mean, I was like a freight train of messiness and I needed to. Like I
Mm.
needed to literally rewire myself. Not even rewire. I needed to remove the blueprint that was imprinted on me that was running constantly in the background. And the only way I could do it was like full rupture. And so I did that in her work. And she pulls some really incredible tools from a woman named Mama Gina, who runs used to run a program called the School of Womanly Arts that teaches a lot of these tools that I now have spent years working with and teach in my groups. But it just rattled my cage. I unburdened so much stuff. I felt completely held by the other women. And the things that have transpired since then because of the women in that cohort, and I did Rockstar Camp again, I can't even measure. So before I tell you a couple examples, one thing I want to say is what also resulted was Meg and Joe really saw me. I saw
Mm.
myself and she really saw me. And she said, I think you really understand what I do here. Like, will you come be my wing woman essentially? And so I'm still involved in supporting her program, and I now run my own, and she has just been so intensely generous teaching me how to run coaching business. She's a master coach. I mean, she's just amazing. But some of the other women, I'm one woman who is the founder and I believe CEO. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. Her name's Susan Bichelle of Skin Worldwide.
Oh,
It's a clothing company. She was a multi-grad of Rockstar Camps, and she asked me to model in a shoot in New York City. And I was the first plus size model in her catalog ever, like ever to be in any of her campaigns. So I wouldn't have had that experience had I not done Rockstar Camp.
if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you didn't get into business to be miserable. The problem is that people feel that if their business gets busier, if they start becoming more successful, that happiness will eventually set in. But it can actually get worse. This is why I created the Business of Happiness Prosperity Coaching. In this one-on-one coaching, we look at how to redefine success on your terms and re-find the joy and the passion in your dream. Visit me at thebizofhappiness.com and become the happiest business owner you know.
And
You know what I just love is the theme here of women elevating women.
yes.
It is
Yes.
just such a beautiful thing. And I want to step back into where you said you felt held and you
Mm,
felt supported and you felt
mhm,
seen.
mhm.
And what a gorgeous, incredible gift that is that we can give one another. And
Yes.
how enormously rewarding that is.
It is. It is. It is. And there's just nothing like it. I made a social media post recently that said, women long to love each other.
I love that, Libby.
Yes, we really do. And the bottom line is, I've done the research, and this is breaking down now, but culturally speaking, for centuries, that was not there were a lot of lies about what women loving each other meant, how we get to love each other, do we get to respect each other, and still, like, if I'm telling Tarryn, you are so gorgeous, it's somehow taking from the woman standing next to you. Like, that's the
Mhm.
lie that we're told. And so this is that new flavor of sisterhood, which I think is a coming home to what sisterhood really can and wants to be. So I just can't even tell you enough what I've seen transpire when we have the conversation in this way in sisterhood, in the coaching spaces, using tools that are not just like teaching the concept, but bridging the gap between the concept and actually embodying it and learning how to approve of our bodies, our choices, our desires, our dreams, and all of that. So I could go off on you about how I've been helped by women.
It's so cool too, because when you allow yourself to do that, when you step
Mhm,
out of that comparison game, that
mhm,
competition game, that judgment game, and you
mhm.
allow yourself to support and elevate other women, it's like a feedback loop. It gives
It is.
you that same acceptance and self-love and
Yeah.
you're allowed to drop that judgment. It's so funny because it's almost like that judgment is a little hit of feel good in the moment that's a long-term
Mhm,
depleter of happiness.
mhm.
Whenever we do
Yes.
that comparison game, we tend to, gossip or put people down or judge
Mm,
people. And it
mhm,
just makes us feel better in the moment. But in the
mhm.
long term, it's so damning to our own happiness.
It is, and it's so damaging to the world, honestly,
To
like,
the
I believe
world.
yes, I believe it's part of why the world's suffering so much, because women have and this is not about hating men, I love men. The system's not working for men either, they don't get to be whole either. I'm just having this conversation about women,
Mm,
um, and it's like, what there's just so much imbalance around this, and it's showing up everywhere. It's showing
mm,
up everywhere. I mean,
mm.
the past week alone.
Oh, I
But
know.
the world is just craving women to really love each other and to do it differently. It will make a mess of it, I promise you. It will never be perfect. It will always be, uh, a wild ride. I certainly don't do it perfectly, and when we stay committed to that lens of, "Okay, I'm going back into the fire, even though this is hard and uncomfortable, and my whole cultural training says, 'Nah, just ditch her,' or whatever it is, like, 'Don't do it, don't' whatever. Fill in the blank, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? It's
absolutely.
like we have to stay if we want it to be different, we have to stay and keep trying.
So wrap this up for me in an understanding, and I think this is also so integral for women, and that is how we see ourselves in our own bodies.
Mhm.
I think this is one of those, it's so something that we keep trying to shake off, make it not important, make it not important. And it's one of those things that just matters to us,
Mm, mhm.
how we sit and feel and live in this skin. And
Yeah.
you know, supporting one another, like, I see the gorgeous beauty in you. I mean, it's beyond measure. It's gorgeous. How do you translate that back in terms of loving yourself for the body that you're in?
Well, this is the double bind that we have been programmed in. It's like women's bodies, there's this like message around how like our bodies are, there's this illusion of our bodies being like revered culturally because we're constantly put on display for consumption
Mm,
in like all these ways. And there's this undertone of never enoughness, like not too big, not too small, not too, all this like it's like a target that's always moving. And
mm,
so until we can go in together, like we're going in and we're not coming back the same, and we're going to keep staying with this conversation until we go in together and into ourselves and look, stare in the face of our trance. My friend Monica Rogers, brilliant woman, podcaster, author, all these things. She calls it the trance of unworthiness. And
mm,
it's like the way I imagine it is I'm a tea bag. You're a little tea bag and someone's steeping you in water that is this poisonous, but you don't know that it is, and because you're steeped in the water. So until you remove yourself from the water and you start having this conversation around, "Oh, I guess I didn't realize that the way I talk about how I'm going to eat this plate of food, whether it's to myself or the constant negotiation we have about every bite of food or how we move our bodies or how we dress ourselves, like it is constant
yeah.
self-loathing,
Yeah.
really. And the double bind of it is we've been convinced that it's the only way.
Mm,
The only way is deprivation.
mm,
It's a lie. The truth is the only way is nourishment. And nourishment looks like so many different things. It's how the clothes we put on our bodies, the way we show up with our partners, it's how we have hard conversations, it's how we eat with peace and pleasure. That's the other thing is like pleasure has been removed from the recipe of success. I am not cool with that.
no.
Especially as women where pleasure is, like, not really on the table anyway. It's not a priority for us. So, I know that I'm not giving a concrete answer, but it's got this big abstract dance because we're in this double bind of unlearning it while it's still there. So I don't know if I can come up with specific examples, but I
What
don't know if
has
that's helpful.
what has changed for you in
Right.
your acceptance of yourself and your body? What has been the key to accepting your body?
Well, what has changed? Everything has changed. Everything has changed. And it started with going into spaces where I was asked to shine in front of
Yeah,
other women, and
gotcha.
they were invited to cheer me on, and vice versa. That's what I mean about the sisterhood work that I've been doing with Meg and Joe for several years now, and other women who are also involved in the Mama Gina work and stuff like that. Um, but
So
they
having the courage to be seen and
Yes.
then enveloped with love and acceptance.
Yes, and having practical dares, I guess you could
Mm.
say,
Yeah.
challenges offered to me for exploring what pleases me and making
Mm,
myself right
mm,
instead of making myself wrong all the time. This is the constant. It's like how can we approve? This is why the self-approval school thing came. So, this is one of the practices and the energetics of the spaces that I have been in and now facilitate, is moving from abandoning, like, my body. Instead of This is how I imagine it. There's a little dial inside of all of us, like a thermostat, and it fluctuates from, you could say hot to cold. So cold being like, I don't feel great, hot being like, I'm on fire, this is great. And we're taught that everyone's hands get to move that dial, and it's really supposed to only be ours. And it's like, unwinding around that takes places where you actually acknowledge it. Like,
mm,
this requires having conversations about shame. Like, people don't want to talk about that. So you
mm,
have to be willing to go into the ugly, nasty, the parts of us that we've been taught are wrong, and and seeing them, giving space for them, not rejecting them anymore, and like recollecting ourselves.
mm. I love that. I love that idea of rewriting the belief structure,
Mhm.
by showing ourselves evidence. When I have the courage to bear this shame or bear this
Mhm.
something I've been
Breathe.
hiding.
Yes.
Yeah. When I have the courage to do so in a safe space,
Mhm.
I find the acceptance and the love, and I can rewrite that fearful
Mhm.
message that has been fed to me for years. If
Right.
this, then you're going to be a terrible person. Or if
Right.
this, then you're a failure. But when I can allow myself that acceptance and the courage to
Mhm.
step into it, because there's a certain amount of action that you're talking about there too. It's not
Mhm.
just mindset. It's you got to actually give
Yes.
your mind some evidence that when you do it, you're safe, and not
Right.
just safe, but celebrated.
Right.
Mm,
Exactly. And one of the things that I learned in the psychology world that has been reinforced in this experience of not just the concept, but the embodiment of the concept through practices and sisterhood,
mhm,
is that to the depth that we can acknowledge and honor our grief and our rage and our is to the extent that we can experience joy and radiance and pleasure and all of those things. And we are in a society where we want to like turn down the volume on this and turn up the volume on that, but it's not how it works. I remember Meg and Joe explaining it that way once, and it was a concept that wasn't new to me, but it really just clicked. It's like we want to buffer out all these other discomforts because we're told it makes you fill in the blank if you are a woman who has anger. It makes you
Mm,
fill in the blank if you're a woman who grieves for too long, or a woman who approves of herself.
mm,
That is also something that is not exactly over the years been championed. So it's trying these new ways of being on together and learning what actually literally listening to what your body says.
mm,
Like, I didn't wear anything above my knee. Like, I would wear pants to the beach for years because I was prioritizing my perception of someone else's discomfort with my body over what my body was asking me for.
mm.
That is self-abandonment. Self-approval is right now I'm wearing Daisy Dukes and it feels great. My thighs love the breeze that I'm feeling from the window.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
And
some
how
of
many
that.
places in our world we do that, where we cut ourselves off at the neck and we just
Mhm.
ignore those signals, so many women I know can relate to going the whole day without knowing you need to pee. Just
Exactly.
ignoring our bodies when they're screaming at us, or,
Mhm.
fasting and denying ourselves food because we're told that's what we should do when our body's screaming for, like you said, that nourishment.
Yes. Yes,
Mm.
and it made me think of what you just said made me think of something I will never forget the first time I heard Megan Jo say this is, "Your body is not just a head carrying device."
Ooh.
Yes, especially as women, whether you have
Mm,
decide to have children or not, like, our bodies are literally portals of life that are
mm,
designed to know what they need, know what happens next, know how to make it through, and we are trained that's what I mean when I say trained out of our divinity of our bodies,
yeah.
because it's like I have chills right now. Our bodies always know. And when I do this work in the group coaching, um, it's so powerful to help guide a woman back to the wisdom of her body. It's
Yes.
so powerful.
Yes.
It's like a
Oh,
drug to watch. You're like, "Yes, it's so good."
and, I think we've also over the decades heard this conversation of not being able to trust your body, and how fearful we've been to trust our body when we get instincts or urges or desires. We clamp it down. We don't
Mhm,
trust ourselves. But it's that relearning and rediscovering the
mhm.
wisdom that is inside of our bodies. So beautiful.
Yes, it's like the body always knows.
Mm.
It really
So
does.
do you have any daily practices that you do to help remind yourself of this or to strengthen that knowing? Or is this just a part of the work because you're immersed in the work that you're constantly learning this and reinforcing it?
Yeah. Well, I'm chuckling because the first thing that came to mind was what I call jiggle therapy.
Oh,
So, it's my thigh jiggling my thighs, like, literally shaking my thighs, looking at them, set like and the reason why I do this, well, 1, because it makes me laugh, but and that's always good, but also because shaking, like, tremoring is, a primitive tool for releasing trauma. So, like when
mhm,
an animal has a trauma, you'll see it go to the side of the road, and I have thigh trauma. I have body trauma. I have fat trauma. Like having fat on your body is like the worst. It's like just cut off my head now as far as the messaging women get
mm.
around that stuff. So one of the things I do literally every day is jiggle my thighs and like I sometimes document it on Instagram and will tag people and request that they also jiggle their thighs. Not everybody answers the call, but some do. um that's one kind of like really fun. I just had to tell you while I was giggling or
But I
why I was
love that one. I think that's such another important thing because it's a part of acceptance as well. Like, how
Mhm,
dare you jiggle your thighs on Instagram? Like,
mhm,
really? So,
exactly.
that giving yourself permission and courage to do the thing. These are your damn thighs. They
Mhm,
are what they are,
mhm,
and being so done with wishing things were any different from what they really are. This is it.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. It's going from like deprivation to nourishment. It's going
Mm,
from making myself wrong to self-approval. And it's so satisfying. I'm not gonna lie. People, and I have no idea who's paying attention until somebody tells me they are, and they're like, I started jiggling my thighs because I saw you do it on your Instagram, and it actually is so satisfying.
mm,
And it's something so simple, but it's like, I'm going to take this minute and a half to honor my cellulite, my
mm,
stretch marks, all the things that are part of me that I've literally been trying to cut off. It's like
mm,
we cannot function at our highest capacity if we're walking around completely fractured around these things. It's not like our minds and our bodies are separate, but we're taught that they are. I mean, we're in a new wave of mindfulness and awareness around that stuff. And, this city didn't get built overnight. Like, it's going to take a while to change how things are run. So, that's one of the practices. And I have many other practices that I do in sisterhood every week. So it's not just solo practices like the thigh jiggle or even just like caressing my thighs. I say thighs because A, it's the part of my body I've struggled with the most, and B, because most women
mm,
have a similar thigh story.
mm,
So like even just, oh wow, that feels really good. Like,
mm,
wow. It's like hugging my thighs. I'm like, yes, I'm sending you love instead of sending you hate. I mean,
mm,
that's really, it's that simple as far as that goes. But then the practices in sisterhood, like I just moving our bodies, ways to hold and witness each other without trying to fix or
mm,
pacify, letting a woman be pissed off and saying, thank you, tell me more, please. And not being like, oh, yeah, I get it. Nope. I'm just actually, there are tools that we have around just holding space. It's like taking out the trash. I'm just going to watch you take out your trash and I'm going to celebrate you. And I'm not going to give you my opinion. And we're never going to talk about it again.
mm.
Um, things like that, too.
Love it. Oh my gosh. Okay, so tell us about this program. This sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure as my listeners are listening here, they're like, I want some of this. Tell
Yeah.
us about how we can find this incredible program that you've developed.
Well, the program you can find at libbybunten.com under the group coaching tab. I do have an application process, so I really want to talk to people. I don't like publicly say, I guess I shouldn't have done that, that you can go click and purchase like and sign up because there's a lot that goes into this. And you and I started off with this like turned on terror. This conversation, when I got into this conversation, I could feel my body light up. Like you'll have
Mm.
listeners who are like, "Oh my gosh, yes, yes, yes." And it's terrifying. So
Yeah.
that's another reason why I feel like I always want to talk to people first, but I'm also really protective of the space and say like, "This is what you're walking into," just so you know. So you can find out about my coaching stuff at the Libby Bunten, or I'm sorry, libbybunten.com.
And
And
we're going to put these links in the show notes,
yes, great.
please. We'll
Yeah.
have these all available to anybody who's interested.
Yes. And so self-approval school is one, what I've realized after all the things have marinated and refined and boiled down is that's what it really comes down to
Mm,
is, are you willing to stop depriving yourself? Are you desiring and
mm,
willing to stop depriving yourself and start nourishing yourself, to stop making yourself wrong and learn how to make yourself right?
mm.
How to stop diminishing yourself out of fear of taking from someone else and instead take ownership of your gifts because it takes the world higher and gives other women permission to do the same thing.
That's it.
And
That's it right there, by the way.
right
If
there.
you take nothing else from this entire conversation, that's everything.
Mhm,
Why loving yourself is so important and
mhm.
integral to the nurturing of others.
Yes. Well, and we hear this love yourself or be yourself. Like I just had this conversation with someone recently and probably was Megan Joe. And it's like, there's a reason that we're afraid to because we have been trained out of it. If we
Mm,
were outrageous when we were kids, no, you're too loud, you're too shiny,
mm,
you're too, don't get too big for your britches. So we need spaces where we can go in like we're all in the cave together and we're going to learn something new and we're going to leave, we're going to try it and we're going to come back and say what happened.
Mm,
So that's a big piece of what happens too. And I learned this. I learned this model of doing it through working with Meg and Joe, through working with a woman, Stephanie, who also is a coach in the Mama Gina world and stuff like that. It's just, it really does bridge the gap between the idea of being and loving yourself and the actual embodying and living it.
so cool. Yeah, it was just such an important part. Once again, the connection of the head to the body. We
Yes.
can understand these concepts, we can talk about them, but we've got to actually let them seep down into those jiggly thighs and feel it,
Yes. Yes, exactly. Let the
right?
thighs breathe.
Yeah, love it. Love it.
Yeah.
Oh, Libby, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show today. Thank you for living this because, this is the one thing that I know my audience members don't know you personally, but
Mhm.
what I admire so much about you is that you're not just talking about this and creating a business, you're actually deeply embedded and saturated in the work and doing this on a daily basis. And hence the photo of you in your underwear that you sent me. I mean, this is just a part of who you are and you're practicing it all the time. And I just honor you for that authenticity and dedication and courage that this
Mhm.
really I get the feeling that this is your life's work, and
Mm.
I'm so grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to soak in the acknowledgement that you just gave me and just say thank you and receive it. Thank you so much. I love you.
Before we leave, I wanna make sure that everybody knows how to find you, and you already told for those people who, may be driving and not checking the show notes, but please know all the links to all of Libby's Instagram account for those of you who want to check out her shaking her thighs. It's on in the show notes. Libby, before we leave here today, tell us what your definition of happiness is.
My definition of happiness is my definition of happiness is living in a way where I nourish and approve of myself and where I then say, come with me.
Mm,
I'll show you how to as well. We can do this.
so cool. Thank you, sister.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to all of you who are listening, please check her out. She's incredible. She's phenomenal to watch. She's phenomenal to look at. And be kind to one another and support one another. We can do this.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye bye.